Today we've got Dr. Wandrag from Tiger Brands. Tiger Brands is doing a lot for farmers. Dr. Wandrag, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Thanks a lot, Thierry, and for the opportunity to share some experiences with you today. I was born and grew up also in the platteland, as they say, the countryside in northern Namibia, that stage still Southwest Africa. I trained as a veterinarian. I still registered in South Africa and in the Commonwealth as a veterinary surgeon, although I don't practice anymore. My passion for sustainability really started when I specialized in toxicology and worked for the Dow Chemical Company, and they focus on sustainability. And when they wanted to move me to Europe, I decided to stay in South Africa. Africa and I then joined Sasol for 12 years, where I had the role of sustainability advisor and specifically focusing on the reporting. And again, the reporting part is an essential part to show to your stakeholders what you are doing and to be reactive and responsive to the questions from your stakeholders. And stakeholders are not only shareholders, it is the broader stakeholder community. I joined Tiger Brands just over 4 years ago. Tiger Brands is the biggest food manufacturing company in Africa with a very, very diverse portfolio, from Albany bread to Black Cat peanut butter to All Gold products, the All Gold tomato sauce and all the jams, the Koo products, something like Doom that you regularly use is in our portfolio. Purity baby food is in our portfolio. So is Jungle Oats. The company is 100 years old, and it basically operated in silos over the years. And 4 years ago, we embarked on a path to get all the different silos together under one umbrella and have one strategy going forward. And that is where our sustainability strategy started. If we look at what the typical definition of sustainability is, and this came from 1987, the so-called Brundtland report from the World Economic Forum, that is the ability to meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. So that was the original definition of sustainability. Since then, the acronym ESG came to the front. And really, what is ESG? It's the assessment of the company's non-financial performance and its contribution to the common good using the following key elements: the environment, so that is the impact that we have on that, the planet; social, that's the people and the prosperity; and then governance, how do we police or govern the environment and social issues. And that comes back to your question, how is it managed within companies, that responsibility. The three pillars of ESG is typically environment, and under that, and this is not exhaustive, but you look at climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, energy, water, waste, pollution, environmental compliance, very important, biodiversity, extremely important, and then resource scarcity. If I can just touch on the last two, biodiversity, you will ask, why is that of concern to us? With more and more farmers and the big farmers doing monoculture crops, we sit with the loss of biodiversity. And biodiversity is essential to keep a healthy ecosystem intact. An example of that is Professor Mervyn King from the King Codes of Corporate Governance in South Africa. That is his pet topic that he always covers, is about bees. If bees are extinct on the planet, we as human beings are gone, because there will be no pollution, pollination of your crops. So essentially, if you look at farming, how do you ensure that you attract bees to your environment, by planting other crops, plants that will attract bees, etc. Resource scarcity, clear example right now is the shortage of the electronic chips that is made in mainly in China for vehicles, for components like washing machines, etc. And that is because of a direct effect of COVID, but also the fact that you cannot get the raw material into China from where it is mined. So resource scarcity is very important going forward and how we handle that. Under the social side, the very first one is your employee relations. And under employee relations, that is really how you look at your relationship with your employees. And that includes, fair wages, decent working hours, and all of that. Training and education, what role do you play as a corporate entity in that? Diversity and equal opportunities, non-discrimination in the workplace. Human rights, very, very important, and that goes back to the farming community. In terms of South Africa, we became complacent about human rights because it is entrenched in our constitution. But when you move into other countries, human rights are extremely important. And for a company like Tiger Brands, within our supply chain, value chain, we have an ethical sourcing policy, and part of that ethical sourcing policy is human rights. And they need to do a declaration every year that they comply to that ethical sourcing policy. Now, human rights in the farming community, that includes things that look like access to sanitation and clean water. Frequently, you see farm workers working, under harsh conditions, but there's no sanitation available for them. Decent wages, frequently those workers on the farm cannot even afford to buy the food that they produce for the farmer. So again, it's a basic human right. Child labor, very important in terms of farming communities. And frequently, example that I used many times is in rice. We import all our rice in South Africa, but the rice is bought through a trader on a commodity market. So we don't know, and you will not know, when you open a bag of plastic rice, where that rice is coming from. It could be from Vietnam, it could be from Indonesia, it could be from India, Thailand, it could be even from America. But how do we ensure that on that farm, child labor is not being used? And therefore, we ask the declaration at least once a year from our tier 1 suppliers to declare that they are not complicit to human rights abuses. Health and safety, part and parcel of the social, and you mentioned mining earlier and discussed that yesterday. We've seen a huge change in South Africa for the good in terms of how mining industry is looking at health and safety. I mean, the horrendous way that miners were abused to work in mining conditions that is not prone to health and safety. And we see that now 40, 50 years after they have started working in mines, and the people retiring, and are going to mention specifically the Eastern Cape, they now suffer from diseases like silicosis and tuberculosis that they picked up long ago in the mines. And the infrastructure is not there to support them. So, they contracted the disease in the mining, in the working environment, but there's no follow-up when they retire, to look after their health. Privacy and security, very important.
May I interrupt you?
Sure.
Your slide seems to be stuck on the very first one. I'm not sure if you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me try something. Can you see a different slide?
Yes. Now you can see.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for pointing that out.
You're welcome.
So labor relations, very important, and then your local community impact. Again, an example that I can use on local communities, when I worked for Sasol, when the civil unrest started around service delivery within towns and the lack of service delivery, the people in the townships next to the refinery in Sasolburg said, hands off Sasol, because they look after our community. They provide schools for us, they provide clinics for us, and hands off. You will not touch the Sasol operations. So our people were allowed to get in and out of the sites without any problems. Then lastly, the G part is governance. And there you look at the board diversity and structure, executive pay, bribery and corruption, stakeholder engagement, very important, and that was mentioned earlier as well. Your procurement practices, risk management, and internal policies. Board diversity and structure go hand in hand again with the experience of your board members on specific topics. If a board member, for example, sits on a subcommittee addressing environmental issues, they need to have a basic knowledge of climate change, environmental issues, etc. So that is very important in terms of your board and the diversity within the board. Siri, please indicate if it's going to the next slide.
It has.
Great. So look at a sustainability strategy. It is really to optimize societal value. And if we look within the circle, the broader operating context, you see 3 circles in the middle. So it's business risk and challenges that you need to address. It's the assets and expertise, and then social needs and resource pressures. And again, that was mentioned earlier. But then also sit with 4 components of a strategic response to societal issues. So you cannot ignore these within a business. And that is your corporate social investment, the ESG that we mentioned, shared value, and advocacy. So those are very important to keep in mind within business. I thought of including just 2 slides on the annual Edelman Trust Barometer. And this barometer tests the trust of different societies and different groups worldwide. And you can see that business hasn't moved from last year. The trust in NGOs improved, but the trust in governments and media reduced from the previous year. Now, clear is that the government does not seem as able to solve societal problems. And I think South Africa is a clear example of that. And therefore, companies are expected to step up to deliver in that field. What is needed is restoring trust, key to societal stability, and that is business, the media, NGOs, and the government. That's sustainability, equity and inclusion, wage fairness, and jobs and retaining jobs. And that will bring you societal stability. In the world, and I would ask you to just Google Larry Fink and his letter to the shareholders that was published earlier this week. Now, Larry Fink is the CEO of a company called BlackRock. It's one of the biggest investment companies in the world. And every year in January, he writes a letter to the CEOs of every company that he has shares in. And you will see from 2019 how it changed over time. And this year, specifically, he said the purpose, the values, and the consideration of stakeholders plays in determining long-term success for companies. He said stakeholder capitalism is not about politics. It is not a social or ideological agenda. It is not woke. It is capitalism driven by mutually beneficial relationships between you and the employees, customers, suppliers, communities your company relies on to prosper. This is the core of capitalism. But if, as I mentioned, with another letter to his shareholders this week, and it is available on the website. If we then move to a greater appreciation of the economic cost and current social and environmental burdens and their trends, you see again on top biodiversity and ecosystem impact, obesity, food waste, climate change, all of them food sector related impacts. In South Africa, what we face, sugar tax, sodium regulations, product labeling requirements, carbon tax, more stringent environmental laws, and then pending legislation on plastics. A very important reference point that I urge you to just Google and download that as well is the Eat Lancet report that was published in 2019. That is the newest one. And it speaks specifically about the food system being threatening both people and planet. And climate stability, environmental degradation, your risk to health, and then a radical transformation of the food systems needed. The move to plant-based dietary patterns, at Syria again, coming from the countryside, we're used to eating a lot more vegetables and fruit, grains, lentils, things like that, legumes, than we do in the cities today. Food consumption patterns change completely. And then lastly, major improvements in food production practices is required, and that is to reduce the food loss and waste, and I will cover that in the next slide. Growing evidence of market opportunities in addressing social challenges, and we can look there at the low-income food markets, reducing food waste, product information, dietary switch, and reducing packaging waste. I will get to the SDGs just now. I'm going to skip that one. Climate change, very important. If you look at this, this is the nutritional challenges. If you look at this world chart, the reddest part is where, and it specifically look at obesity in adult females. You see that South America, South Africa, North Africa, and the Middle East, a huge burden in terms of obesity. This slide is sobering, and I will just highlight in South Africa, 3 in 5 women are overweight or obese in South Africa. 3 in 5. 2 in 5 males are either obese or overweight. South Africa is the #1 country in terms of obesity in sub-Saharan Africa. And 23% of women suffers from anemia. 45% of children has got a vitamin A deficiency. If we look at non-communicable diseases, these are diseases like diabetes, hypertension, 7% prevalence of diabetes across the country. And there was a 51% increase in hypertension since 2050 in South Africa. And again, this all goes back, keeping in mind food security. South Africa, the social and economic inclusion, already mentioned. South Africa is not one of the most, it is officially now the most unequal society in the world. Low rate of growth makes it difficult for the youth to get employed. We need to include them in the economic inclusion. But 18.3 million people in this country relies on social grants. This was in 2019, and since COVID, that number increased tremendously. Now, taking into account we are approximately 60 million people in the country, that's about a third of the people in this country who survive on social grants. We see the service delivery protest that is increasing dramatically. More than half of the population in South Africa are living in poverty. More than half, with 10% of that living in extreme poverty. That is the background to food security that we need to address. 30%, and I think it is now shifted to 37% of people in the country are unemployed, and then the very high percentage of youth in the country that has got no formal education. And in a session yesterday with the GRI and the Swiss embassy in Pretoria, the average age in Africa is currently in the order of 35 years. And they said by 2030, that will change to 25 years. And what do we do to address the education, the upliftment of youth within our societies and the countries where we operate? In terms of climate change, South Africa will get warmer, and I will show that on a next slide. And that has got a direct impact again on where we grow crops in the country. Day zero in Cape Town, we know about, and what are we doing to address water use in the country? If we look at climate change specifically, we will see temperature rise in South Africa. That is the average temperature globally, they estimate 1.5 degrees. In South Africa, they look at 3 degrees will be in by 2050. And that is largely in the central and the western interior. Greater diurnal temperature changes, so changes between your night and day temperatures, shifting rainfall patterns. Rainfall is likely to decline across southern Africa, with greatest decline in the western interior. So Western Cape will get drier, while the eastern part of the country, Mpumalanga and KZN, will get wetter. Likelihood of an experienced increase in intense rainfalls through summer rainfall areas. And that ties again directly in with the previous speaker, where he talked about soil. If you've got these extreme heavy downpours, your topsoil washes away and you lose good, healthy soil. We may experience a later onset of rain seasons, both for winter and summer rainfall areas, and that again has got an impact on what food you can grow. Certain crops need a certain period of rainfall and also daylight length and temperatures. More extreme temperature events, the heat waves, the high fire danger that we see, and trends likely mirror temperature patterns with diminishing increases along the coast. How are we going to address that in South Africa? We cannot do it on our own. You need to look at the just transition needed across all sectors in South Africa. You need to mitigate the South African economy that needs to be decarbonized. and then we need to adapt to the impacts of climate change within the country. This slide just shows you the food basket itself, and going back to what is really seen by the Lancet report that I mentioned earlier, that works out at about 4,300 Rand a month. That's way above the average salary that some of our workers receive in the country. The expenditure on food in the household, and it's a survey of 28,000 households, is in the order of 1,027 Rand. So a lot of impacts there as well. In a good slide from a report of the WWF published in 2019, in terms of climate change, the erratic weather patterns that we mentioned, 50% of all South Africa's wetlands have already been lost. And you know that the wetlands are basically the catchment areas for water. A third of all food in South Africa and in the rest of the world are wasted. And in South Africa specifically, of that 33%, 44% is fresh fruit and vegetables. And then you compare it to the situation where we sit in South Africa, where 20 million people on average go to bed at night hunger. And how do you address that? So what we did in our strategy is, as the largest food company, there are three broad interventions that we need to do to optimize societal value. That is addressing the triple burden of nutrition, and that is malnutrition, obesity, and non-communicable diseases. We need to stimulate the economy activity through inclusive business to create sustainable livelihoods and contributing to addressing regional environmental challenges. We broke our sustainability strategy in 4 pillars: health and nutrition, enhanced livelihoods, and environmental stewardship. You can read what is under each of these pillars, but very important is that we linked it to specific SDGs. Now, why do we address SDG 1, no poverty? Unless the citizens in the countries where we market have money to buy our products, we will not succeed as a company. Zero hunger, very important. Good health and well-being. Gender equality, something that I feel very strongly about. Women carries the purse to go and buy food. And if we don't empower them with the knowledge to make the right decisions, we will still fall back into health issues and hunger issues. Clean water and sanitation, decent work and economic growth, reduced inequalities, responsible consumption and production. And under that, SDG 12.3 speaks specifically about food waste, and the target is to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030. And the baseline year is this year. And there I can tell you very good stories of how Tiger Brands is addressing food waste. In the first place, you try to avoid food waste in your production process by optimizing the process itself. But you sit with a batch that comes off the belt that is not meeting the specifications. So what do we do?
Doug, can I interrupt you, please?
Yeah.
I just wanted to find out how far is your presentation, because I would now like the second, after you have concluded it, to then jump on to the practicalities.
I've got one more slide.
Okay, all right.
So in terms of food waste, for example, how we prevent food going into landfill sites is to pull near-dated stock from the shelves, and that we use in our programs with schools, with universities, etc. We, for example, have a program at 7 universities, 9 campuses. It's called Plates for Days, and we provide to students a basket every month containing food as well as sanitation products. We last year and the year before, through CSI projects, distributed more than 100,000 food baskets to vulnerable communities within the country. So that's an example of your responsible consumption. Climate change, said a lot of that, and life on land, going back to soil, it is extremely important. But almost the most important one is SDG 17. No company, no entity can do it on its own.
Yes.
You need to work in partnerships to deliver. So in terms of our 2030 commitments, we have established, and this was approved by the board last month, what we call very audacious targets, really stretched targets. And I'm just going to highlight one. 65% of all electrical energy at manufacturing sites will come from sustainable energy solutions. So we've got 8 years to reach that target. I will end there. Just on, it was mentioned earlier on circular economy projects. We look at that as well in terms of how we can, for example, in the plastic space, get circular economy projects funded so that your bottles that is recovered, either from dump sites or in the communities, these guys with the trolleys that you see in the streets, how can that bottle get back into a plant that recycles that bottle? A typical water bottle like this is made out of PET. There are 7 types of plastics. And on average, this bottle can be recycled 8 times. So the plastic, the bottle itself is ground, it goes through an extrusion process, resin comes out on the other side, which is then used in the manufacturing of a new bottle. So those are all issues that we look at, but very important in these sustainable livelihoods. When we engage, our primary focus is job creation, Black people getting jobs, Black females getting jobs. That is our first focus when we look at any project.